Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura ki jai. Namo Vishnupadaya Shri Gaura Priyamate Srimati Bhaktivedanta Tirtha Goswami Nityanamini. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashnabhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamini. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachayane Nirvishesha Shrunivadi Paschata Deshatayane. Namo Vishnupadaya Gaura Prashnabhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Puri Goswami Nityanamini. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat. Granthe Arambhe Kori Mangalacharam. Guru Vaishnav Bhagavan Tiner Smaran. Tiner Smarane Hoy Vigna Vinashan. Anayashe Hoy Nijumanchita Pura. So first of all, I offer my respectful obeisances to my gurus, especially to my first guru, my mother, who was very, very enthusiastic about Srila Prabhupada Saraswati Thakura, and her eyes would just light up every time she would talk about him. So I'm particularly remembering, I remember her always, of course, but particularly on this day because she was so enthusiastic about him. And to my Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Prabhupada Puri Maharaj, who he always used to tell us that his disciples, that he was not really our guru, that he was offering us as disciples to the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada Saraswati Thakura, who was our Param Guru Dev, so I offer my obeisances to him. I offer my obeisances to my Diksha Guru, Srila Gurudev Srila Bhakti Puri Maharaj, who also, of course, always used to talk about Srila Prabhupada Saraswati Thakura, and to His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who spread the glories of his own guru, Srila Prabhupada Saraswati Thakura, throughout the world by carrying out his order and by whose grace we're all here. And I thank Ramtirtha Prabhu for giving me this opportunity to speak. It's actually for my benefit and it's my purification, to give me this opportunity to attempt to glorify Srila Prabhupada Saraswati Thakura, so I'm very appreciative. And of course there's, Mother Kamagiri is far senior to me, and so I'm speaking in the presence of my seniors, but it's only for my encouragement and purification that I've been asked to speak. And finally, I offer my obeisances to all of you, who are also, as the audience, are giving me this opportunity to share. So it would be possible to speak about Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura for a week, which I'm fortunately not going to do. But because, of course it's possible to speak about that about any Vaishnava, but Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura was a revolutionary, and so even for a mundane academic, who's only interested in information, he did so many unprecedented things in so many different ways that it would be possible to spend a lot of time speaking about each of them. So in the interest of time, I'm going to I have a list of specific things, and I'm going to speak about each of them very briefly, just giving a succinct highlight. And I have more information here, so hopefully there will be a little bit of time for questions. So if someone wants to expand something, then I will be able to answer questions. And also, there are biographies of Srila Prabhupada Saraswati Thakura upstairs in the library. So I hope also to spark some interest in people in learning more about him, so people can also learn more on their own. So first of all, so I'll be reading a bit from these two books. So this book, Prabhupada Saraswati Thakura, Prem Vilas Prabhu and Lilita Prabhu have kindly lent to me. So I'll be reading from A Divine Life a little bit. So this was the biography that my mother wrote of Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura in 1996. I think she wrote it in 96 and it came out in 97. So that is like the first 50 pages of this book. So very briefly, so As some of you may know about, have heard of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur. He's in our group Parampara. He appeared in the 19th century. There's actually also a biography of him in this book, a short one that my mother wrote. But very briefly, he was in the 19th century when the British Raj had taken over and was ruling Bengal. And he was among the educated classes and he was looking, he was a middle-class person, and he was, the Bengali middle classes had been sort of, generally were influenced by the British to especially the educated people were sort of not taking to their own dharma. They were, the British were sort of disrespecting their dharma, so it had sort of been lost. And the true, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, who were descended from, who were in the line of Mahaprabhu, the ones who were really hewing to the line of Mahaprabhu, they were very few and they were very hard to find. So there had been a couple of different currents where some people had been, there were these caste Goswamis who claimed to be descended from Nityananda Prabhu, who were saying that, oh, they were Smarta Brahmins, or some of them were Smarta Brahmins. I'm not speaking about everyone, but this was also the perception in society. There were Smarta Brahmins who were basically reserving Mahaprabhu's teachings to their own family lines. So that was one class of things, class of people. And then there were also Sahajiyas, who were making Vaishnavism a very cheap thing and were introducing material contamination. That was resulting in a lot of disrespect among the educated classes of Bengal for Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and so it was actually very hard to find Gaudiya Vaishnavism at that time. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur himself was among these educated classes, and he was searching for dharma, and then he found, with a great deal of difficulty, the script. And after looking at all the scriptures from all over the world, the religions from all over the world, and all kinds of classes, he found that the highest thing actually existed in Bengal, the Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and he found the scriptures that had, like Chaitanya Charitamrita. So these scriptures had not been printed, so they were in manuscript, so it was difficult even to find the scriptures. And he also unearthed the place of Mahaprabhu's birth, found where that was. So he found that there was actually this great treasure that was hidden in Bengal, and it was restricted to a few people. Also, people in those people who did have it, they were very humble, and they considered that they just wanted to keep their mood pure. So they weren't going and looking for people, because they also considered that going and looking for followers was dangerous. Like, it would make one have pride and make one, maybe contaminate things in order to please the followers. So, but Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur saw that there was this great treasure, and that this treasure should be shared not only in Bengal, but all over the world. So he had this dream and this vision that this great treasure should be shared all over the world and should be preached widely. It shouldn't be a matter of just a few people. So among the many accomplishments that he had was that he found these manuscripts and he started preaching, and he even sent a book to the West, Sri Chaitanya, His Life and Precepts. It went to McGill University. He had it printed and sent to the West. So anyway, of course, to talk about Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur would take a long time, but briefly, he wanted a person to help him to actually enlist this vision. And that person, he was praying for that to happen. So when he was living in Jagannath Puri, so it was at 3:30 in the afternoon on Friday the 6th of February, 1874, Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura was born. And he was given the name Bimala Prasad. Bimala is the consort of Jagannath Dev. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur considered this son to be her mercy. And he was born with his umbilical cord wrapped around him like a Brahmin's sacred thread. So that was one of the characteristics that showed that he was a great personality, and that indicated that this might be the person that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur had been praying for. And another thing happened. So when children in Bengal are 6 months old, then they have a grain giving ceremony. So it was around the time that when Bimala Prasad was six months old, it was around the time of his grain ceremony that when that was supposed to happen, that there was the Rath Yatra, the famous Jagannath chariot festival, happened in Puri. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur's house was on the Grand Trunk Road, which is the road down which the cart proceeds. So it's exactly on that place. So the cart came, and the way that the cart moves, if as many of you've seen, if you've gone to any festival, so it's always a very mystical thing, because always it's pulled by large numbers of people, and the same number of people are pulling at all times, but sometimes he stops and sometimes he starts, and it is completely by his own will. Like no one can understand, how why he started and why he's stopping. So in this case, I have the date here. Well, anyway, so in this case, in the Rath Yatra of 1874, the cart stopped just in front of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur's house, and it remained there for 3 days. It wouldn't go. As always, there's this huge ocean of people pulling, and yet it would not leave. So on the third day, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur took the baby, Bimala Prasad, out to the cart and to Jagannath's, up on Jagannath's chariot itself, and then Jagannath's garland fell from his neck onto the baby. And so that was one indication, and then also the baby's first grain was Jagannath's own Mahaprasad. So there are so many interesting happenings in Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's life that I cannot speak them all in this time. So instead, I'm going to speak certain highlights that were sort of unprecedented. Most of this talk will be highlighting different contributions of his that were unprecedented. So one of them was the Gaur Mantra. Okay, so this was so these are not going to be necessarily in chronological order, but it's just describing different contributions. So in 1911, there was a meeting arranged by many devotees and scholars of religion, where Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur established the eternality of the Gaura Mantra. So we sing, all of you have experienced that we sing Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. That we sing this regularly, and that we pray to Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a historical personage who lived from 1486 to 1534. So not everybody in India or even in Bengal accepted that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur established with many proofs from scriptures that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that this mantra, the mantras worshipping Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, are eternal, and this is an eternal mantra. This is not just restricted to a few people, restricted to Bengalis, and but this was an eternal mantra. So Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur spent a long period of his time in Mayapur, the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in solitary bhajan. So he was chanting 300,000 names of the Lord every day, and it was very, very intense. And Mayapur itself, it wasn't a developed place, so it was a very solitary place itself. And then he was engaging in this solitary worship. So then, at the end of this, though, he wrote a song called Dushtamon Tumi Kishir Vaishnav. Oh, my wicked mind, what kind of a Vaishnava are you? So he could have. I mean, he was a eternal associate of the Lord, and he was completely absorbed in bhajan. So like all the other Gaudiya Vaishnavas up to that time, he could have just remained in solitary bhajan. But he wrote this song which says, which was actually sort of speaking against solitary worship and saying that so people had this idea that if you try to speak to many people, then you're actually trying to collect followers and you're trying to be prideful. And what he explained in this song is that actually, if you're alone, you can also be doing that for your own prestige, just to think that you're you're better than other people. You're just worshiping by yourself, and your own worship is perfect. So in that song, that's what he established, and he decided that he actually wanted to share with everyone. So I'm going to read a little bit about a vision that he had, the divine vision of Srila Prabhupada, 1915. Srila Prabhupada was so here when I'm using the title Srila Prabhupada, I'm speaking of Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. So in this, because that's the main subject of this book. This is how it's written here. Srila Prabhupada was feeling very discouraged in the absence of Srila Thakur Mahashaya, meaning Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and Srila Babaji Maharaj, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, his guru, seeing the helpless condition of the spiritual section in the country and the propaganda of the Sahajiyas, imitators. He was thinking, how will I fulfill the desire of my spiritual masters? How will I be able to preach the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? I do not have enough money or manpower, nor do I have any knowledge or talent that would enchant the public. I have no material skill or wealth. By the way, he was very materially skilled. He was extremely educated, a mathematician and an astrologer, and very erudite, but this was his humility. How can this grave task be performed by me? I won't be able to preach the message of my spiritual masters. Thinking all this, Srila Prabhupada displayed his pastime of gloom and depression. Then one night he saw in a visionary trance that Lord Gaurasundar had arrived from the east side of the Jogpit temple. Jogpit is his birthplace, with his associates. Amid the sound of Sankirtan, he was ascending to his birth site. With him were the six Goswamis, Srila Jagannath Das Babaji, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji were also present in their effulgent transcendental forms. Addressing Srila Prabhupada directly, they said, "Why are you in such a state of anxiety? Begin your task of establishing pure religion. Everywhere preach the message of Sri Gaur and spread the service of the holy name, abode, and desire of Sri Gaur. We are always ready to help you, being eternally present with you. In your mission of establishing pure devotional service, you will always receive our help. Behind you, innumerable people, unlimited wealth, and extraordinary scholarship are waiting to help you. Whatever you need at any time will immediately appear to serve your mission of pure devotion. With full enthusiasm, proceed with your preaching of the message of pure devotion as it was preached by Srimad Mahaprabhu. No material problems can impede you. We are always with you." The next morning, Srila Prabhupada told us, us being Paramananda Vidyaratna and the other disciples, the next morning Srila Prabhupada told us about this visionary trance with great ecstasy. So I would like to tell a story that I read in Bhaktisiddhanta Vani Vaibhav. So this is a wonderful 3-volume book by Bhakti Vikash Swami, and it's upstairs in the library if any of you want to read it. So this happened, so this is an example of, this is maybe like one of the earliest examples of something coming. So the day before Janmashtami of 1905, Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, so this was before he had was doing massive preaching, but there was already the Jogpit temple established. So he was considering how Janmashtami would be celebrated, and he was wondering where would he get any milk. And then he thought, oh no, why did I think that? Did I think that because there will be a Nirjala fast tomorrow? Maybe I thought that because of that. So he was considering that he had committed an offense by thinking in his mind about where he would get milk. So that evening, a milkman came to Jogpik Temple spontaneously and brought tons and tons of milk for the festival. So basically, his desire was fulfilled, and this milk was used to celebrate the festival and offer to Sri Krishna and to distribute prasadam to many people. But Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, he went and begged forgiveness from Srimad Mahaprabhu. He said, "Oh no, thank you for fulfilling my desire, but I'm so sorry that I gave you so much trouble that you came to do this for me." So already at that time, Sri Krishna was bringing whatever Srila Prabhupada needed, and in this vision, his Guru Varga were telling him not only that, but everything needed for preaching would be brought to him. So one of the things that was needed for preaching was the sannyas order. Now, well, I think I can just say that from memory. So Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, he gave himself sannyas. So as all of you know, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself was a sannyasi, but he was initiated by Keshava Bharati, who was not in a Vaishnava Sampradaya. And the reason was that there was not a sannyas order of, well, there might have been a Vaishnava sannyasi who could have given him sannyas. Some people say that they would have been so heartbroken by the idea of giving Mahaprabhu sannyas that they wouldn't have given it to him. So maybe we needed this impersonalist. But anyway, even though Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself took sannyas, he didn't start a line of sannyasis. So if you look at our Guru Parampara following that time, those people did not take Tridanda sannyas. So in particular, just immediately preceding Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura were Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj, and they both had Paramahansa Vesh, which is, it's even considered to be higher than sannyas in a way. So there was not a tradition of Gaudiya Vaishnava sannyas. So Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, as I had just said, had decided that he needed to preach this mission and spread it. And in order to do that, he needed to establish the sannyas order. So he is the one who actually established the Tridanda sannyas, Gaudiya sannyas order. So he gave himself sannyas by looking at a picture of his Guru Maharaj, and he researched the Vaishnava sannyasis from other sampradayas, like especially the Sri Sampradaya. So he introduced this order of Tridanda sannyas. So among the many things that we have to be grateful for, if any of us, which I know all of us, have been preached to by a sannyasi, then we have to thank Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura for that. He introduced the sannyas order. Now, there's something that people often remember how he was harder than the thunderbolt and softer than the rose, and people remember how he was very outspoken and very straightforward in his speaking, and was not intimidated by anyone. He would always speak the truth. But one thing I wanted to say that is not said so often is how he was also softer than the rose. So this is from my Guru Maharaj. So my mother wrote this biography of my Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj, and it also has a lot of information about Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. And Bhakti Vikas Swami also quoted it it's in the select bibliography of his book. So this incident is in his book also. So this is a story about molasses from Gurudev. So again, I'm speaking of Srila Prabhupada as Srila Saraswati Thakur here. Srila Prabhupada was very aware of the personal circumstances of each of his disciples. If anyone was in any kind of distress, he would take personal responsibility for helping them. Sri Pranavananda Prabhu, this was my Guru Maharaj's brahmachari name, felt that Srila Prabhupada's affection was more deep and all-encompassing than that of millions of fathers and mothers. Srila Prabhupada also used to personally supervise the distribution of prasad. Shri Pranavananda Prabhu was fond of sweets. Srila Prabhupada would smilingly call whoever was serving prasad and tell him jokingly, "Here is Pranavananda. He is from Jashore." Jashore was a district of East Bengal. "You must give him date molasses." Jashore is famous for its date molasses. Prasadam time was always a happy time. Godbrothers used to laugh and joke with each other and sometimes snatch prasad from each other's plates or give something to others that they knew to be their favorite. All this was done in front of Srila Prabhupada, who seemed most pleased seeing his disciples taking prasad happily. So that's one instance of his affection and respect for his disciples. And another instance is, my mother heard from her Guru Maharaj, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, who was another disciple of Srila Prabhupada, that Srila Prabhupada used to take his disciples to see the birthplace of each of his disciples. So for instance, my mother's grandfather, Sujanananda Prabhu, Dr. Hasan Ghosh, was born in Khulna in East Bengal. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj told her that he had been to Khulna by the Ruksha River because he had gone with Srila Prabhupada. He had gone there specifically because one of his disciples had been born there, just to see the place. So that's another instance of his, and he had so many disciples. So that's an instance of his affection. So part of his preaching was that he wanted to establish the press. So as I said, that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur had already started printing the Vaishnava literatures, and before that time they were all in manuscript form, and so they had to be copied by hand. So that automatically restricted them to a few people. So he had already started that, and Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta continued that. Yes. In 1913, Srila Prabhupada established a press called Bhagavat Jantralaya at 4 Sanagar Lane in Kolkata, and began publishing and printing such books as Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita with his commentaries called Anubhashya, Srimad Bhagavad Gita with the commentaries of Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Gaura Krishnodaya by the Oriental poet Govinda Das, and so forth. And so in particular, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur had written a commentary on Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita called Amrita Pravaha Bhashya, and Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura also wrote a commentary called Anubhashya. And so this is the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in Bengali script with only the verses of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. And this that Luke Prabhu has kindly brought to me today is the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita that's the version that Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura printed, which has the commentaries, his father's commentary, the Amrita Pravaha Bhashya, and his commentary. And if you read, so people who read the Bengali of this and of Prabhupada A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami's English commentary, a lot of those purports are translations of this, and he also mentions that they're there. So this is one thing that we all have to be grateful to Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, is those commentaries, that they were printed and that they were transmitted. Srila Prabhupada A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami translated them for us in English, but it was many of those commentaries were written, and also Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura also, he preserved and also wrote many of those commentaries. Also, he did the Bhagavatam commentaries, and the Bhagavatam commentaries fill many books. Where did Jagannath Prabhu go? Jagannath Prabhu has seen them, fill many volumes. And from the 4th canto or so, the English that we have from Srila Prabhupada A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, from the 4th canto up to canto 10, many of them are following closely the commentaries of Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. So he wrote 2 commentaries. Basically, one of his commentaries was translation into Bengali of the commentaries of earlier Sanskrit commentators, and the other of his commentaries was his own Bengali commentary. So he wrote 2 commentaries on Srimad Bhagavatam. And so I'll say a little bit more about that. So this is again from this book I'm reading. Srila Prabhupada wanted the Gaudiya Math to edit, publish, and print all the scriptures that are the very basis of Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. So in addition to Bhagavad Gita, he wanted to print Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, Sri Brahma Samhita, etc. In his lectures and articles, he frequently glorified Srimad Bhagavatam. In a well-known article titled Vidya Bhagavat Avadhi, Bhagavat is the highest limit of knowledge, he wrote. So there's actually a lot that he wrote here, but I'll skip most of it and just quote a little bit of it. Bhagavad Gita has 700 verses and Srimad Bhagavatam has 18,000 verses. Srimad Bhagavatam is Vasudev's unadulterated commentary on Vedanta. The doctrine and the commentary were written by the same person. It contains verses which can give the living entity all perfection. That is why there is no need for any inferior scripture in place of Srimad Bhagavatam. By reading or hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, the devotee can capture the Supreme Lord immediately within his heart as the most worshipable object without any obstacles. And then, going further, Srimad Bhagavatam is the lamp of knowledge. It is the sun among Puranas. It is a nectarian fruit. It enchants the soul with Harikatha. So that's the end of the English quote, English translation of Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. So, Srila Prabhupada gave his writers and editors the arduous task of editing, publishing, and printing Srimad Bhagavatam. While he wrote the commentaries himself, his editors had to edit and proofread the whole book. They also had to write the summaries of each chapter. So the printing presses were busy night and day. Daily, weekly, and monthly magazines were being published, as well as books and pamphlets. After Srimad Bhagavatam was published, Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Sri Brahma Samhita, and other books were also published in Bengali. The printing press was always busy as various books and magazines were always being printed, and they had different deadlines and sometimes different destinations. So this was a huge enterprise, and this was the first time that this had happened, that there was this printing of the Gaudiya Vaishnava commentaries on Srimad Bhagavatam. This had not happened in history before. All right, so another thing that he did was, so there was a sort of a corrupt caste system that existed. So I'm reading here from this biography. In India in the 19th and early 20th centuries, most Brahmins were more concerned about rules and regulations that were separated from the concept of devotion and not based on the injunctions of authentic scriptures than they were about what was spiritually and morally beneficial for the rest of society. A Brahmin was no longer a person with Brahminical qualities, but simply a person born in a family of Brahmins. Since the caste system was rotting at its core, it had become meaningless and was in fact detrimental to the spiritual and moral welfare of society. The Brahmins opposed any ideas that might threaten their preeminence, which was bereft of any moral or spiritual basis. Although many educated people had lost their faith in the beneficial role of the Brahmin class, they did not know who could take their place. The pure Vaishnavas led reclusive lives hidden from the public eye, and the Sahajiya Vaishnavas aroused more hatred and suspicion than respect. In this context, Srila Prabhupada wanted to establish the principles of Daivi Varnashram Dharma, the system in which the service of the Lord is placed in the center of society. A Vaishnava is respected by everyone else, and one's caste is ascertained according to one's natural tendency, not according to one's birth. So this, he then later, in 1911, in Balighai, there was a meeting where he read a famous article, which actually has been printed, called Brahman and Vaishnava. And he, so there was a, basically a debate. And so this is a tradition in India, that there will be a debate and there will be people who are taking two sides. So the question was, who is higher, a Brahmin or a Vaishnava? And so so when he arrived at the debate, there were two groups of people who had already taken these two positions. So Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura began by glorifying the Brahmins. and quoting from different scriptures. And the Brahmins were overjoyed, because even they didn't know that there was so much glories of them in all these different scriptures, because Srila Prabhupada was very learned and erudite. But then he began quoting from many more scriptural quotations, proving that a Vaishnav is higher than a Brahmin. And so what happens generally in these debates is that by the proclamation of the assembly, generally one side is considered to have won. So he won this debate, and he established the superiority of pure devotees over all classes of people. So I will tell a couple of very striking incidents where he established, where he did something by his personal charisma. So one was that Srila Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj, when he left his body, he had said something. He had said that he didn't want any honor. I mean, he was so extreme in his running away from honor. I mean, he did all kinds of things. So one of the extreme things, I mean, that would be another whole talk. But one of the things he said was that he wanted his body to be dragged through the streets of Mayapur. And so a lot of people actually gathered and said that they were actually going to do that. Well, okay, so I'll just tell it from memory. So first of all, he explained that even if we're like stupid and offensive, we should understand that this was said by Srila Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj out of his humility. And Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura says that I consider it my great honor that I will carry his body on my head. And so he was the only disciple of Srila Gaura Das Babaji, because otherwise, he was very reluctant to accept disciples. So some of those other people who were calling themselves Babajis were saying that, first of all, they were questioning that he was even his disciple or had any right to say anything about it, and then they were saying that they would, carry out his order. So Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, so he was alone, facing this crowd of people, and by his own, the strength of his speech, he said, if any of you who claim that you're Babajis, if any of you has not had illicit connection with a woman in the last 6 months, or 1 month, or 1 week, or even 3 days, then you may have a right to say something. But otherwise, I'm a Naishtik Brahmachari, and I'm also the only disciple of Srila Gaura Das Babaji, so it is my right to put him in samadhi. And when Srila Prabhupada said this, then gradually all those so-called Babajis actually had to leave the place, because they couldn't actually, I mean, basically they were Sahajiyas. So because by the strength of his, he was Shaktashar. This is one of the 26 devotional qualities, one who derives strength from the truth. So by the fact that he always spoke the truth, and he always derived strength, his word was so strong that he alone could part the crowd and was able to carry out his desire to put Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj in samadhi. And so I had just explained about the how he was talking about the Smartha Brahmins, the caste Brahmins who were not really Brahmins in truth, but were Brahmins by birth. So because he spoke so strongly about that in particular, and because many of them were powerful, he ran into a lot of opposition. Like basically he was afflicting the comfortable, one could say. I mean, he was a revolutionary in many ways. So this led to some opposition. So I'll read a little story that happened in 1925. A very unexpected incident took place during the Gaur-Mandal Parikrama of 1925. Everywhere Srila Prabhupada went during the Parikrama, he preached about the pure devotional concept of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Little did the devotees know the degree of opposition and animosity they would face. Hundreds and thousands of devotees assembled at Paramatpala Navadip for preaching and Sankirtan. Their lordship Sri Shivada Govinda were placed on the back of a decorated elephant, and they were guarded by 2 devotees. Sannyasis were giving lectures, and many people assembled to listen to the Harikatha. Unbeknownst to them, some carriages which had been filled with broken bricks and draped with cloth were waiting nearby. Suddenly some thugs started throwing these broken bricks at the assembled devotees. Sri Sundarananda Vidyabhinod, who was on the elephant, immediately guided it away from the scene to protect their lordships. The devotees first tried to appease the thugs by reasoning with them, but this did not work. Many of the devotees were wounded and began bleeding. Sri Pranavananda Prabhu, that's my Guru Maharaj's brahmachari name, was hit in the head and bled, but fortunately his wound was not critical. All the devotees tried to look for shelter in the nearby homes, especially for Srila Prabhupada, but all the nearby homeowners had been ordered beforehand not to open their doors. They were also afraid that they too would be attacked by the thugs. Amidst the shock and confusion, somehow, Sri Vinod Bihari Brahmachari, who was later Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj, who was also the sannyas guru of A.C. Bhaktisiddhanta Swami Prabhupada, managed to take Srila Prabhupada inside a house. There he exchanged his white clothes with Srila Prabhupada's saffron clothes, so Srila Prabhupada wouldn't be recognized. Then he quickly took Srila Prabhupada to a safer place. So I just want to say, so this incident took place in 1925, so it was somewhat early in the preaching of the Gaudiya Math. It wasn't like at the end of Prabhupada's life. He lived until January 1st of 1937, but despite this violent attack, neither did he ever at any moment hold back or curtail the preaching, and neither did he ever advocate any violence. The preaching was all through words. Even when they were being directly attacked, the devotees did not defend themselves by like throwing bricks back or anything. So the strength, his personal strength was so much that despite physical violence, he himself and the devotees whom he inspired continued unabashed to speak strongly and to speak the pure line of devotion. So finally, he was going to at the end of 1936, even though he was relatively young in age, he was showing his pastime of illness that he was apparently going to leave soon. So he issued his final instruction. And I think I don't have time to read much of that. So, so he said, so this is pretty short. So on December 23rd of 1936, he gave his final instruction. He called all his assembled devotees towards him. He said, "I have caused anxiety for many people. Perhaps many people have considered me their enemy because I was compelled to tell the unadulterated truth. I asked them to serve the Lord with all sincerity. I have given much anxiety to many people only because I wanted to inspire them to serve Krishna sincerely, without material desire and duplicity. One day they will understand this. All of you please preach about Sri Rup and Sri Raghunath with great enthusiasm. The supreme goal of all our desire is to become specks of dust at the lotus feet of the followers of Sri Rupa Goswami. All of you remain united in the shelter of the Ashraya Vigraha." Now the Ashraya Vigraha is Srimati Radharani. So this was also one of the specialities of Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. Another name of his is Barshabhanavi Dvaita Devi Das. He was the servant of Srimati Radharani. So he was telling his disciples, all of you remain at the lotus feet, remain united in the shelter of the Ashraya Vigraha in order to satisfy the transcendental senses of the supreme entity of non-dual knowledge. Excuse me. All of you somehow live simply in this temporary world with the single goal of serving the Lord. And these final instructions go on for some time, but I won't continue in the interest of time. So he left on January 1st of 1937, and I will just summarize. So I'll read very briefly from this summary of his life. Srila Prabhupada is the most magnanimous giver of the message of Mahaprabhu in this age. He took the treasure which had been safeguarded by a few and gave it to many. He revived the Sankirtan movement of Mahaprabhu by enabling devotees to joyfully assemble together in a modern institution. So this institution, this idea of even having institutions, was made to spread the Krishna consciousness, and he is the first one to make such an institution for Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Now that Vaishnavism was no longer in constant danger from oppressive regimes and reactionary Brahmins, and now that the permanence of printing could protect the sanctity of the true and pure Vaishnavism of Mahaprabhu from the corruption of Sahajiya interpretation, it could be given freely. The greatest gift of Srila Prabhupada was that he gave the highest concept of devotion to thousands of surrendered souls who took shelter at his lotus feet. Those who came to inquire from him about Krishna Prem, the ultimate goal of their lives, were overjoyed to find out that whatever concept of pure devotion they might have had before, Srila Prabhupada's concept was infinitely higher than that. His disciples saw him as their supreme source of the highest devotion. So, Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura ki jai. Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura ki jai. Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura ki jai. I thank you all for your attention. Do we have time for any questions?
I just want to say one small story, that incident that happened. It shouldn't take more than 2-3 minutes, and then we'll move on to the program because we are already late.
Okay.
I thought this is very. I read one nice, very nice incident that happened with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. This depicts his mood of preaching, his mood, how he preaches and what his mood. Once he sent his disciples to establish a center in Bengal, somewhere in Bengal. So all his disciples went there, many disciples went there to establish the center. And finally the day has come where he had to install the deities. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura went to install the deities, and then he was very pleased with all the arrangements. Then he asked the disciples, who is that brahmachari who did all these arrangements, who did the preparations? I am so pleased, bring him. And then the disciples said, Guru Maharaj, this brahmachari, he was entangled with a lady. So we rebuked him. So that's why he fled away from this place. So he's no longer here with us. Then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura was very, very unhappy with that. And he immediately said that, I don't want to establish a preaching center or a temple here. I don't want to install deities. We spend gallons of blood to bring one person into Krishna consciousness, to bring him, to take him out of Maya. And because he made a mistake, you chastised him and he ran away from this place. So if somebody makes a mistake, at least if he is serving Krishna and following other things, at least the sin will be washed away eventually. So you don't have to send him away from Krishna. That's what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura said, and said, you immediately go and find him. Unless he comes back, I am not going to install the deities. So immediately his disciples went and searched for the brahmachari. Finally they found him. And brahmachari was really weeping and crying because he was not able to serve Krishna at that point. Then he came running to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura and took shelter of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura told his disciples, and he quoted a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 28th chapter, verse 1 and 2. The translation goes like this: the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one should neither praise nor criticize the conditioned nature and activities of other persons. Rather, one should see this world as simply the combination of material nature and the enjoying souls, all based on the absolute truth. Whoever indulges in praising or criticizing the qualities and behavior of others will quickly become deviated from his own best interest by his entanglement in illusory dualities. But the purport, then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur continues the purport. He gives a purport for this. He says, to bring a person from the clutches of Maya is very, very hard. If lust or any other attachment is present in that person's heart, it will go away very soon. If he is chanting and remembering and listening to Harikatha, be very careful. Don't criticize devotees or non-devotees. First, look at your own condition and try to purify yourself. Is there any lust in you? Is there a kutinati, that means deceit in you or not? Be worried about that. Don't worry about others. Sri Guru and Lord Krishna are responsible for others. You cannot do anything to help them, therefore you have no right to criticize. So that's the mood of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So basically, inspire, encourage everyone, whoever is coming to the temple or bring them to the temple. People make mistakes, but don't send them away from Krishna. I think that's what Bhaktisiddhanta. That is the mood of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So
yeah, and if I might say like 2 sentences more about that. So there's a letter in this book where he wrote to someone had written to him complaining about somebody else, and he says, I am forced by my position as the president of this mission to criticize my disciples, and this is a very dangerous task. I don't know why you would go out of your way to do such a dangerous and risky task. So there's a letter in here about that also. So,
thank you so much, Rukmiṇī Mataji. In the interest of time, I think we have to stop this and move on to the next part of the program, which is Pushpanjali, followed by Guru Puja. So,
Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasati Gaur Bhakta